Welcome back, everyone. My name is Wallace, and I am the chief editor at the Clinical Trial Vanguard. And I have the pleasure here to sit down with Bill Wallace, who is the CIO at Intercept Pharma. Bill, pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here, Mo.
Yeah, I'm excited about this discussion. So, Intercept is building a foundation to scale operations. And you're doing this to simplify trial management, right? So from your vantage point as CIO, what were some of the operational inflection points? Growing data volume, cross-study complexity, or is there something else like that made a foundational redesign not just like a desirable, but rather essential to business operations?
Sure. So when I joined Intercept in 2022, we had CROs, and each CRO we were paying each one to build a data repository for our data for that trial, and then we would have to migrate that data in. There were inherently delays that were a problem for our clinical business teams because they always felt like they were behind the eight ball from a timeline perspective, getting the data to be able to then work with the CROs and work with the sites. And at the same time, from a technology burden perspective, each CRO was doing their own repository. Each thing was a separate data migration setup that had to be done. And so there was a lot of time and effort, and it really felt like a lot of wasted time and effort. So partnering with the senior leadership, I said, look, we need to really take a more platform-based approach to this. Mm-hmm. I have what I call the 80-20 rule. I believe that 80% of business capabilities can be, 20% of platforms can support 80% of business capabilities. And so in that vein, we spent time talking to Veeva, having the business understand how the Veeva clinical platform could support what they were doing, and most importantly, the CROs still do what they do. They still manage the sites and et cetera, but instead of us paying to have them build an individual platform for each of our trials, they use our platform. So we have control and governance of the data from the beginning, and so the business has access to the data, so it's really helped the business processes because they get the data in a timely way, and from a technology perspective, it's dramatically reduced our burden because we now have a common platform that we can use across all of our new trials.
Mm-hmm. And how has that impacted, would you say, clinical operations and vendor management and oversight when it comes to the governance of incorporating this data in your daily operations?
Sure. So because the clinical team has access to the data at the same time that the CRO does versus the delays that they used to have when they were waiting to get that data moved from the CRO repository, they now can see things working, see what's going on with the sites. They can kind of see things that maybe aren't optimal before they become a red flag, maybe when they're a bit of a yellow flag, and they can proactively work with the CROs, and they really do feel that it has helped them in their efforts to work in collaboration with the CROs and keep things moving forward in a timely way.
So definitely more predictive management and control of your oversight rather than relying on what is given to you by your vendors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where the direction where regulators are now headed with the E6R3 guidance, where you have to be able to oversee your clinical trials through access to your real-time data. So this is, in a matter of fact, is preventative rather than reactive.
Well, since you brought it up,
yeah.
We actually just went through a review with our business colleagues on the E6R3 and making sure that everything that we are doing is in compliance and set up for all the E6R3 regulations and that everything is good.
That's great to hear. And really inspiring because still the industry lags in this area. So it's inspiring to hear this coming from you that you're actually implementing it already.
Well, so our new parent, Alpha Sigma, that we were purchased at the end of 2023, and of course, they're European, and we're their first investment from a pharma perspective in the U.S. And so they, obviously E6R3 is big and important for them, and this is where they have leveraged our Intercept clinical platform for their new trials. And so that's where you get the great commonality of having a good solid platform like Veeva, and now for mergers and acquisitions, there's often disruptions, there's always things that happen, but in being able to do the concept of best of, so we're integrating into their RIM space, we're integrating into their quality docs, again, part of the Veeva platform, but because they didn't have a clinical platform, they were still outsourcing to CROs, it's given them a great opportunity to take advantage of the clinical platform we have built for their new trials, and at the same time, we can together collaboratively take care of the E3R6.
It makes total sense where that's coming from. So harmonizing data across platforms is pretty challenging, but it's also very central to AI enablement. So when you talk about creating a foundation to support artificial intelligence, what does that harmonization journey look like from, in practice at Intercept? And how have you overcome the divergence in systems or culture?
So we're on the AI journey. We have several pilots that are going on, and we've just started to actually productionize some AI that has worked out well and get that into the regular ongoing business process. But you bring up a good point when it relates to the data. So I've talked to a number of consulting organizations, and some of that, I don't know if you've ever saw the movie Field of Dreams, the idea of build it and they will come. And some of them, we're going to pull all the data into just one spot, and then the business will figure out how AI can help them. And my answer is no. You have to have a business focus. You need to look at the specific business use cases and then figure out what data your AI needs. So I don't think of it as one grand data lake that everything AI is going to come from, because realistically, on the clinical space and some of the R&D space, you have validated data. And in order for the business to make good use of the AI, that data needs to stay validated. At the same time, you have your finance team that doesn't need validated data, but you can't put validated and unvalidated in the same place and expect it to work well. So we have what I like to call data lakes. We have specific areas where we've set up as we've, again, focused on the business processes and what the business can get benefit from AI, and then we pull that data specific to those specific business needs into one spot, and now we can leverage that. And Veeva has been very helpful for that, because so much of their data is, consistent from across the platform. You can view it. It doesn't go to too many different places, or where it does move, Veeva already has those connectors built. So it makes it extremely easy versus some of the other areas where we can pull what we need based on the business need and then put AI onto that. And I do really think that Veeva is pretty far ahead in how they're approaching AI, because yes, they've talked, we've been here at Summit, and they're talking about how they're doing their own agents, and they want to make that helpful for the organizations, and that's great. But having those APIs and being agnostic, allowing various companies to bring in external agents and utilize that against the data, that's absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm. So you can basically custom build your own agents based on the data that's already structured.
Yes, and for some of our business needs, we have taken agents and done some of that customization already. Mm-hmm. And then we can leverage that because Veeva is making it easy to get the data.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the technology is there to achieve consistency in using these types of agents?
I would say, back in the day, when the internet first came out and people were saying, what exactly is the World Wide Web? I do think we're at the beginning stages of AI. I think that there is still a lot of work to be done to get that overall consistency, and I do think that things will advance and are advancing rather rapidly. But again, the platform approach that Viva has and making those APIs available makes that part easier so that you can get to that consistency sooner.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking about AI, you've mentioned the balance between innovation and data security when introducing AI into biopharma. How do those considerations influence your infrastructure choices today? When you're looking at balancing AI, compliance, and access and readiness.
So security is essential. And right now, for a lot of what we do, working with compliance, we put the agents into our cloud environments so that the training and you don't have a situation where any other company can see the training that our models are doing. And that is essential. When large language models first came out several years ago, I was actually working with one of my team members. We were playing around with a public LLM at the time, and we actually came across data that was proprietary for another pharma company. And I happened to know the person who headed IT there. I called them up. It turned out that one of their consultants had been playing around with AI and took proprietary IP and put it in the public space because they didn't realize that if you put it over there, it's accessible to others when they look at how answers are received. So security is essential, and I think that when you do it with a good focused approach, you can keep it where it needs to be. And I think as time goes on, there's a lot of learnings and a lot of platforms like Viva and how they're approaching AI is going to be very compliant. But right now, I think that having the LLMs in our space alone is very beneficial from a security perspective.
Mm-hmm. And so looking forward into the future, beyond this foundational layer that you've built, do you think that, interoperability with real-world data, with external registries or hybrid trials, define the next phase in data management? And what worries you the most about that frontier? I mean, one of the things you mentioned is data security, but are there any other things?
Well, when it comes to real-world data, hybridization of data, and how it deals with the trials, I think that there is a lot that can be done and should be done. And at the same time, it's not so much a worry, so much as I think that the FDA and other regulatory bodies are still figuring out exactly how they want to incorporate that type of data into the results of what is presented to them. And so I think that there is a learning industry-wide, but also regulatory-wide in terms of how they want to do it. I mean, a lot of people know, we're in rare liver disease. A lot of the rare diseases, it's very tough. There are challenges with a placebo arm because if somebody has an option of getting onto a trial or if they're on the placebo side, they may be leaving this earth sooner than they want to, then often it's tough to keep them in a placebo arm, and you can understand that from a personal perspective. So I think that there's a lot of good opportunity for real-world evidence to be utilized from a trial perspective, but I think that there is a lot that the industry is still waiting on in terms of how the regulators really want to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting because regulators, they write guidance documents. They write these, I wouldn't say regulations, but they're suggestions, right, in terms of how they're going to operate. But I don't think even regulators know how to operate this until they actually get into it themselves. And they then start to modify it.
They provide a lot of guidance, but guiding principles, there's a lot of things that can move in between.
Interpretation.
Interpretation, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Bill Wallace, CIO of Intercept Pharmaceuticals, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mo. It's been great.
Pleasure.
Thank you.